There is a long established capability in STEM to take a service and have it driven externally by a transformation so that you can have something calculated at runtime. So you might want the size of the market to be calculated at runtime, or even the penetration, or even the traffic per connection. So for a long time it's been possible to use an external customer base or transformation to drive the customer base input, and it's not so well known, but actually for a long time it's also been possible to have a transformation to drive the penetration or to drive even the traffic per connection. It's not done very often, it's not often that useful, but because it's usually it's more commonly possible to just estimate these things statically in advance, but sometimes you want some connection from one service to another where it makes sense to do this. So you've been able to do those things, and sometimes it's just because you want a driving relationship from one service through to another, as I say, or it could be more sophisticatedly because you want to establish a value chain, or you might even want to define a cross-charge structure, and both of those topics are way off topic for this video, and they're more they deserve to be explained separately, so you can go and read the manual to find those. The only thing I want to communicate now is that the ability to have this external transformation driving the service was essentially overlooked when in STEM 7.0 we added the ability to choose whether your traffic calculation was volume driven or peak driven, and we added the new inputs, the nominal bandwidth per connection input and contention ratio inputs to allow you to define a data service directly in terms of the speed as opposed to the volume. So for the last N versions of STEM, you've been able to have a peak driven service with a nominal bandwidth per connection, but it was only possible to define the speed of the service within the service itself as a static assumption. And really now, just for completeness, we've now filled in the gap so that you are now able to take a separate calculation for the bandwidth, so a runtime calculation depending on other quantities in your model, and to have that pass through into the service so that it can then be connected. The only qualification is that the transformation which drives it has to have an instantaneous output, otherwise it doesn't really make sense. So just quickly, let's have a look at how that works in practice. So if I switch across to the editor, here I have a service, and it's not a very interesting service, but you're familiar with the idea of the customer base being defined externally by connecting from the market segment to the service. And that then basically says that the customer base is not a static assumption, but it pulls the numbers from that separate market segment element. And you can do the same thing from a transformation for the customer base. You can also do it for the penetration, and you can also do it for the traffic per connection. And so what you can now do is down here we have the nominal bandwidth per connection input, and up until now this was only able to be defined as a static numerical assumption, and now finally there is the ability to say, actually I'd like that to be calculated externally, and you do the same thing. You click on the connect tool, click on the transformation, you go to the service, and when you drop on there it then prompts you for which input you want to control, and so you can see there are 4 things that you could actually control: customer base, penetration, traffic per connection were the existing ones, and now we've added the ability to control the nominal bandwidth per connection as well. So you just check that and say OK, so replace the existing data, and then the nominal bandwidth per connection is now calculated at runtime with reference to this separate transformation. Nothing particularly radical or exciting about this, it's just filling in an unintentional gap that was left in the past.